So those are some fictional strategies. And this style has become so popular that in the early 1970s, this guy, his name is Tom Wolfe, and you can recognize him wherever you see him based on his clothing. He's usually wearing some sort of off-white suit. He's very much a character, and the author of many very famous stories like The Right Stuff and Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test, which we're going to read an excerpt of. And so Tom Wolfe, in 1973, basically tries to explain that the novel is about to die, all right, and that we're in this age of the end of the novel, and the beginning, a new birth of this new kind of journalism, which he calls new journalism. And I'll give you a little quote from what he says too. Well, actually, let's read it. How about someone read this for us? Sophomore, sure.
Okay.
I'll read it.
Great.
Not even the journalist who pioneered in this direction doubted for a moment that the novelist was the reigning literary artist now and forever. All they were asking for was the privilege of dressing up like him, until the day when they themselves would work up their nerve and go into the shack and try it for real. They were dreamers, all right, but one thing they never dreamed of. They never dreamed of the approaching irony. They never guessed for a minute that the work they would do over the next 10 years as journalists would wipe out the novel as literature's main event.
Great, thank you. So, this is a part of his book that he actually wrote called New Journalism. And in the book, the book is sort of a manifesto of this sort of new genre. And he's not alone in thinking this. This was during the 60s revolution, which, funny enough, happened mainly in around 1970, 71. A also revolution of writing occurred. Tom Wolfe, Hunter S. Thompson, you may have heard of. A lot of these guys, Joan Didion, a lot of these people were writing this new kind of journalism, combining creative fiction strategies to report. And a lot of people took this last line, that he would wipe out the novel as literature's main event as like this antagonistic declaration, and it was echoed in lots of media. I don't think we need to focus on that because that's been debatable, and I don't think we're in a point in the world where we can look back enough yet, and with hindsight and see if that's happened, right? Like, do you think the novel's ending? I don't know. I don't think we can say. So instead of focusing on that, I want to focus on this other part, which is the point of at least what he's doing, which is the idea that nonfiction writers at least want the privilege of dressing up like fiction writers, using the fiction tools. All right? That's what I think this is all about. And this leads us to some names. Speaking of new journalism, new journalism was the term for a while, and then around the 90s, we started to use other terms like literary journalism or creative nonfiction. And thus, when you talk about one, usually people are referring to the others. They're kind of all interchangeable, although somewhat distinct from one another at the same time. We're going to read some journalism that's very literary, but maybe not complete creative nonfiction. We'll talk about that later. But let's focus on creative nonfiction. So here's your sort of definition, which is provided by this guy, Lee Gutkin. And I want you to, I don't want you to type this whole thing out. I want you to kind of read this and for yourself create a sort of 1 to 2 line definition of creative nonfiction. All right, so could someone read this for us? Okay.
The word creative refers simply to the use of literary craft in presenting nonfiction, that is factually accurate prose about real people and events in a compelling, vivid manner. To put it another way, creative nonfiction writers do not make up things. They make ideas and information that already exist more interesting and often more accessible.
Okay. So don't feel like you have to write this. I'm going to actually give you some more sort of information, And then, but I do want you to start thinking about a definition. So if there's certain key words here that you like, or key phrases, you can put those down. But I think you get the idea so far. You know, another thing he said was creative nonfiction stories are dramatic, true stories that use scene, dialogue, and close, detailed descriptions. Techniques usually employed by poets and fiction writers to examine and explore a variety of subjects. Politics, and this is the part we haven't talked about yet. We're going to actually look at a lot of these too. So we're going to look at stories that involve politics, economics, sports, race relations, family relations, the arts and sciences, and more. You are right now taking your personal essay and kind of going into the family relations part of this. Also, creative nonfiction heightens the whole concept and idea of essay writing. It allows a writer to employ the diligence of a reporter, the shifting voices and viewpoints of a novelist, the refined wordplay of a poet, and the analytical modes of the essayist. Again, seeing sort of a pattern here. Well, why don't you do this? Why don't you, just based on what I've just gone through, I want you to write for yourself a sort of definition of creative nonfiction. All right? So try in like one sentence to define it. And you can use semicolons and em dashes if you want, but see if you can do that.
Yeah,
Middle.
really?
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's okay.
We can get back. I know.
Yeah, I think that's your. Just put your feet on her lap. She'll show them that. All right. You can get the notes from somebody.
Well, this will be on YouTube.
Or it'll be on YouTube.
Ooh.
Possibly.
Okay.
If this works. All right. Oh, well, before we get to that, anybody have a definition they want to share?
A way of writing the truth nonfiction and a way normally reserved for novels.
Okay. Yeah. Anything else?
A writing style that uses creative literature in order to present nonfiction in a way that is more accessible and interesting.
Great. Yeah. So it makes it more interesting, accessible. Yeah.
Transformation of pure action.
Good. Similar. Same thing. All right.
The usage of literary craft in presenting factually accurate prose in a compelling manner to add interest to the story.
Nice. Well said. All right. You get the idea? I know, there's something like kind of, there's something wrong about defining the genre at the same time that we do it, because it's like, you wouldn't define poetry, or like, you don't sit in a normal class of English and define the novel, but I think it does help us a little bit. But at the same time, the irony is we're like kind of, by defining it, we're kind of boxing it in, which is the sort of opposite of what the spirit is of this genre. But it is a genre, and of course, we'll develop and evolve, and then they'll say, oh, it's limited in so many ways. But in the meantime, it is, hopefully you can see that it's really about like a sort of genre of lack of genre. There's like a lack of rules, or it's the spirit of breaking rules. Similarly, and as you saw in Methland, this is kind of the image I use for talking about microcosm versus macrocosm, which you got Rapley or another teacher at some point you know about. Same with creative nonfiction, you kind of break the barriers between yourselves. You have the sort of societal self, the sort of macrocosm, where you can talk about family events on that sort of scale, or sports or whatever, and that's more like journalistic kind of reporting, public stuff. And then there's also like the sort of mesocosm, the family level, and by family I mean you know, if you were to write about your community, so like even MICDS, you can consider sort of your family or your community level. Yeah.
So would it be creative nonfiction, like if the book took place in like a different city, but it was like the same facts, would that be creative nonfiction too, or would that be different?
Yeah, how could you do that? What do you...
Like, would it still be creative nonfiction? Like, it actually took place in Oline, right?
Mhm.
So if it gave a different like name of a town, would it still be creative nonfiction?
Oh,
Like taking the facts, but like putting it in a different place.
like he changed the names of the
Yeah, I remember
people.
that. Yeah.
He does. And so
Would it be like more
does he
based off
just
the true story?
does he say that they're like, what does he say? How does he set that up?
Yeah, he said they didn't want to be
Yeah.
mentioned. Right.
And so we're going to talk about how in creative nonfiction, you still want to be honest, and by doing that, he indicates that he's changing their names. If I just change their names, then I'm going into the world of fiction again, right? So there's some, I have to keep, he keeps kind of, even if he does drift off into using literary techniques like that, he still kind of has some sort of connection with the real world. So that's an important point that we're going to talk about is, you know, when you do something like that, or you guess what people are thinking, or you recreate dialogue that may have happened, but you're not sure if it happened exactly that way, you're going to have, at least if you say you're doing that, you're free. So back to this, the sort of, the second level is where most writers usually stay or like to kind of go between. And then, of course, there's the level of the personal world, the individual. So you could report on just your own experience of something, which you're doing right now with your photographs. But you can also connect this, right, to other levels. And good nonfiction writers, if you notice, even Nick Redding here breaks those planes. He goes, he starts at a very macro societal level, and then literally, actually, in the plane, right, and then goes down closer and closer towards the individual. The rest of the book deals with individual people in this town, so you learn about, you basically spend time with individuals and learn their story. In the meantime, he sets it up, though, by going back and forth. And then when you're with the personal, when you're with the individuals, you will at some point, you know, he will also go back to that larger deal. And he'll say, you know, here's this guy, here's this meth user, and you're going to hear his story, and while you're hearing his story, all of a sudden, you're going to see how he's not just an individual, but a part of a larger problem going on. Right? So, with that said, let's go into that. And let me stop this here.